one vision. Simuka Zimbabwe, simuka. Chamisa chete chete. Kapinde hake mkomana. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Voterai. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Voterai wo. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Voterai. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Hara watekambo zama kukia kia. Asikutonga nyika kudikia. Mukomana ndia nekia. Yellow yashika banya ya taji. Yeah. Citizen Coalition for Change. New Great Zimbabwe. One people, one nation, one vision. Simuka Zimbabwe, simuka. Chamisa chete chete. Kapinde hake mkomana. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Voterai. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Voterai wo. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Voterai. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. 2023 kana movota. Voterai wo. Chamisa. Mazimbabwenzi kana movota. Muko voterao. Chamisa. Voterai. Yao kana movota. Kapinde. Yao kana movota. Voterai. Kana movota. Kapinde. Yao kana movota. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Voterai. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Voterai wo. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Voterai. Voterai mkomana. Apinde. Kapinde mkomana. Hara wasekambo zama kukia kia. Asikutonga nyika kudikia. Mukomana ndia nekia. Yellow yashika banya ya taji. Yeah. Citizen Coalition for Change. New Great Zimbabwe. One people, one nation, one vision. Simuka Zimbabwe, simuka. Chamisa chete chete. Kapinde hake mkomana. Apinde. Voterai. Apinde. Voterai wo. Apinde. Voterai. Apinde.
This is Letter from America. Today's topic is the best and worst of times for Zimbabwe when Speaker of Parliament Jacob Modenda becomes a self-appointed fashionista for CCC MPs' dress colors. The social, economic, and political environment in Zimbabwe today can best be described by 12 words in the introduction to a book written in 1859. The book was set in a European environment, some 5,144 miles or 8,279 kilometers away from modern-day Zimbabwe. That was 163 years ago. Yet these 12 words so accurately reflect and resemble the situation in Zimbabwe today. Set against the background of the French Revolution, English author Charles Dickens wrote the book A Tale of Two Cities. The book's opening introduction reads, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." He might as well have been writing about today's Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's narrative today is about the worst and the best in the country. The dualistic character of Zimbabwe, as in Dickens' novel, is a narrative of not just the best and the worst of times, but also light and darkness, hope and despair, all reflecting the recurring mirror images of good and evil in Zimbabwe. In 2022, this year, Zimbabwe has had its best times. The launch of the Citizens Coalition for Change, or CCC, and its contagious yellow color, the instantaneous spread of yellow across the length and breadth of the country in a way that has never happened in the country's history, represents the best in Zimbabwe. But the worst for Zimbabwe was the unleashing of violence, threats, abductions, and the killing of CCC supporters. Another worst for Zimbabwe was the illegal banning by police of at least 9 CCC rallies on the pretext that police did not have enough resources for the rallies. When they had exhausted this excuse, police cooked up another excuse that ZANU-PF had reserved the location for their rally, or that the CCC's proposed rally site was too close to the one for ZANU-PF. When police had run out of excuses for banning the rallies, they allowed them to proceed, but under draconian conditions. And they also allowed some of them with 1 or 2 hours for their scheduled start time, within their scheduled start time. Here is how CCC's president, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, described part of the worst of times for his party. Referring to ZANU-PF and their Monzora and Coupe surrogates, Chamisa wrote, "Operating in cahoots with each other, they went on a spree of firing our legitimately elected representatives in parliament and local authorities. They grabbed our headquarters. The oppressors diverted our income under the political parties' financing legislation, giving it to their surrogate. They even went after our name." Chamisa concluded, although they misappropriated these material possessions, they did not realize that they were meaningless without the soul of the party. And the soul of the movement is vested in its citizens. The by-election results were astounding and can and should be told and retold because they are historical. CCC won 19 out of 28 seats that were on offer. That was 67.9%, or more than 2/3 majority of the available contested seats. CCC also won 75 out of 120 of all the contested seats in local authorities. One of the most notable victories was in Kwekwe Central and Mbizo constituencies. In the 2000 elections, that's some 22 years ago, MDC candidate Blessing Chebundo won the Central Kwekwe constituency against Mnangagwa. At that time, again 22 years ago, Chebundo's home was gutted by ZANU-PF thugs. Chebundo was viciously attacked and was in a coma during the election campaign, giving Mnangagwa, his rival, an advantage. But when the results were announced, lo and behold, Chebundo won by 15,352 votes against Mnangagwa's 8,352 votes. Mnangagwa became the butt of many jokes that he had been defeated by a candidate who was in a coma. But this time, in 2022, Chebundo had joined ZANU-PF and had promised to bring to ZANU-PF enough votes from Kwekwe for victory. Well, for joining ZANU-PF, the voters in Kwekwe punished him severely. CCC candidates Settlement Chikwinya and Judith Tobaiwa rode to victory over the ZANU-PF candidates. The best thing that came out of these worst experiences was the start of a defiance campaign by the youthful members of the CCC. They resolved on their own that they were not going to obey unjust restrictions by the police. They stood fast and defiant when police tried to disperse the rallies that they had banned. Another best thing was the youths had become the vanguard of a defiance campaign. They sang inspirational songs from the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. Amandla Gawethu, Ilizwe Ngelethu. The anti-apartheid Pan-Africanist Congress's slogan of defiance in the 1960s, no surrender, no retreat, became the rallying cry, the clarion call for the youth rebellion in Zimbabwe this year. The worst of the times for Zimbabwe was ZANU-PF, with the active collaboration with the Zimbabwean Electoral Commission, ZEC, rigged the elections. Team Pachedu, a civic activist group, used its technical expertise to reveal many situations of vote rigging by ZANU-PF and ZEC. But the best times for Zimbabwe was, notwithstanding the flagrant ballot rigging, illegal police action against CCC, this 2-month-old baby, CCC, roamed to an overwhelming victory in the May 26 by-election. CCC President Advocate Nelson Chamisa openly, publicly, loudly, and defiantly declared that the party was unstoppable. CCC had survived all efforts by ZANU-PF, ZEC, and the government to suffocate the newly formed party, but without success at all. The worst time, however, was when CCC MPs marched in their yellow attire into Parliament. The Speaker, Jacob Mudenda, another ZANU-PF surrogate, and who responds to anything against CCC, illegally banned the wearing of the yellow color by the CCC MPs. He did so in response to Chinotimba, a ZANU-PF henchman whose ignorance about parliamentary procedures is painted all over his face, had complained. Thankfully, CCC Vice President Tendai Biti challenged the legality of the Speaker's decision. Biti had to remind the Speaker there were no rules on what color to wear or not to wear in Parliament. The only rule was MPs must wear decent clothing. Look at all the MPs, Honorable Speaker, Biti said. Do you see anyone who is not decently dressed? Speaker Mudenda was left with an egg on his face because he had no legal grounds for his ruling. He had just appointed himself the fashionista. Zimbabweans must have been left shaking their heads to learn that the Speaker of Parliament, Jacob Mudenda, exhibited such crass ignorance of parliamentary protocol and had become a fashionista for CCC MPs' dress styles. Another worst for Zimbabwe was the Auditor General's annual report that exposed the massive looting in government ministries and agencies. Every year, more than $1 billion in US currency is looted through corruption in Zimbabwe. The Auditor General's report for 2020 showed that ministries could not account for $1.4 billion. Her report has come up with about the same amount every year. Other analysts said $100 million is looted every month in Zimbabwe. The ZANU apparatchiki are in a free-fall looting spree. Investigative journalist Hopewell Chingono has said all the looted money could have been used to rehabilitate Zimbabwe's broken infrastructure. The major ministries of health and education are seriously underfunded. CCC Vice President Biti said the budgets for these ministries were not completely paid out. Only about 30% of the budgets allocated to the ministries of health and education was actually paid out by September last year. Yet the budgets for defense, home affairs, President Office, CIO, and other security agencies were overfunded. What is the government response to corruption in Zimbabwe? Absolutely nothing by way of resolving the problem. Instead, Vice President Chiwengwa suggested that the powers of the Auditor General should be reduced. Chiwenga has never condemned corruption in a significant way. The same applies to Mnangagwa. He has poured cold water on allegations of corruption. When he was appointed president after the unceremonious ousting of the late Robert Mugabe, Mnangagwa appeared to be focused as a priority on fighting corruption. Mnangagwa gave people who had externalized funds 3 months to repatriate the funds, or else face the consequences. He even claimed he had a list of people who had done it. It was partly for this reason that many Zimbabweans thought Mnangagwa was going to turn the tide on corruption. But 3 months came and went. Mnangagwa did absolutely nothing. Today, 5 years after he became president, Mnangagwa has done nothing about combating corruption. Instead, he has become hostile to anyone who raises the question of corruption. In one interview a few years ago, he was asked what he was doing to combat corruption. His answer was, corruption has been a fact of life in all countries of the world, and it will be with us for as long as we live. He did not elaborate. He did not give a straightforward answer. He did not say exactly what he was doing to combat corruption. And during a campaign rally this year, Mnangagwa said he had been asked about corruption in Zimbabwe since independence. He said he wanted to answer this question, but remembered that he had been part of the government that engaged in looting public funds. So he said he decided to keep quiet about it. His exact words were, "Ndagati regandi ndinyarare zvangu." I say to myself, let me keep quiet about the matter. But where Mnangagwa was unwilling to give straightforward answers on corruption, someone else in ZANU-PF came out in the open. Former ZANU-PF's political commissar Victor Matemadanda, who was fired from his position after he was accused of fanning divisions, did not mince his words when he said as much as 15 billion US dollars had been looted. Matemadanda, who is now Zimbabwe's ambassador to Mozambique, said no one was going to do anything about corruption as long as they were benefiting from it. It was up to the people of Zimbabwe, the taxpayers whose money had been looted, to stand up in mass demonstrations. Matemadanda said as long as the people of Zimbabwe are quiet, the looting of taxpayers' money will continue. Covering up looting by ZANU-PF was once described as the Mozambique syndrome by the late Edison Zobo. Asked what he meant by Mozambique syndrome, Zobo said, whenever the ZANU Aparachiki, ZANU top officials lost an argument, when we were in Mozambique, they would accuse you of being a CIA agent to avoid the substantive issues. Today, ZANU still uses the same Mozambique syndrome to cover for their shortcomings. Notice how often they use sanctions as an excuse for misgoverning the country. They also accuse the people who criticize ZANU-PF as agents of foreign governments. Now they are spreading the rumor that CCC was funded by foreign interests. They do not accept that the CCC campaign was funded by Zimbabweans in the country and in diaspora. When pressed to allow the diaspora to vote, ZANU-PF used a laundry list of arguments and excuses against it. Their very first argument was that the diaspora were scattered throughout the world and it would be difficult to administer their votes. It was brought to their attention that the vast majority of Zimbabweans are in South Africa. Others are in UK and USA. The former governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Gideon Gono, had traveled around the world meeting Zimbabweans to encourage them to invest their money in the so-called Zimlink that the government was setting up. At one of the meetings, he was asked why government was eager and apparently able to organize structures for Zimlink for the diaspora, but unwilling to do the same for the diaspora vote. Gono could not give a cogent answer except to say he was a banker and not a politician. Another reason for not allowing the diaspora vote was given by the Finance Minister Chinamasa, the then Finance Minister Chinamasa. He said government had no money to organize and run the diaspora vote. The United Nations Development Program offered to pay for administering the diaspora vote. But Chinamasa said Zimbabwe was a sovereign nation and would not want foreign money to interfere with its internal election programs. This was the same government that was appealing for international aid for its food relief and other government programs. Yet another reason was that the diaspora vote would not be allowed because of sanctions, meaning ZANU-PF officials were on the sanctions list and could not travel to campaign for their party. Someone reminded ZANU-PF that South Africa, where more than 3 million Zimbabweans are based, did not have any sanctions against Zimbabwe, and that sanctions applied to less than 100 ZANU-PF individuals at the time. Yet another excuse which ZANU-PF mumbled incoherently, but did not press much because it was sheer nonsense, was that if the diaspora wanted to vote, they must first pay their outstanding taxes in Zimbabwe. If the diaspora were up to date in payments, they must show proof before they could be allowed to vote. The worst of times in Zimbabwe is ZANU-PF is continuing to loot Zimbabwe's taxpayers' money at the rate of more than $1 billion every year, using all dirty tricks to undermine basic human rights for Zimbabweans, as well as rigging the elections. Yet the best times for Zimbabwe is the youthful Zimbabwean population that is now more vigilant than ever. They are now engaging in the politics of defiance and sometimes confronting the police. There is a rising coalition of the willing and mounting opposition to ZANU-PF, and more significantly, police, CIO, and army are beginning to tire. They are getting tired of being made to do ZANU-PF dirty work. In short, Zimbabwean youths who are more than 70% of the country's population, are increasingly becoming aware that their future is being gambled away by ZANU-PF. And they have and must take the responsibility to bring down ZANU-PF regime and vote for the party of their choice. For the youthful Zimbabwe, removing Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF from power and voting for the party of their choice that will invest in their future will be the best of times for Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening.
This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, Citizen Coalition for Change, New Great Zimbabwe, one people, one nation, one vision. Simuka Zimbabwe, simuka, chamisa chete chete, Gabini hake mkomana, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana, Voterai, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana, Voterai wo, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana, Voterai, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana. Harawanze kambo zama kukia kia, asikutonga nyika kudikia, mukomana ntia dekia, yellow yashika banya ya taji. Yeah, Citizen Coalition for Change, New Great Zimbabwe, one people, one nation, one vision. Simuka Zimbabwe, simuka, chamisa chete chete, Gabinde hake mkomana, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana, Voterai, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana, Voterai wo, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana, Voterai, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana. 2023 kana movota, Voterai wo, chamisa, maZimbabwenzi kana movota, mugovoterawo, chamisa, Voterai, yawo kana movota, yawo kana movota, Voterai, kana movota, yawo kana movota, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana, Voterai, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana, Voterai wo, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana, Voterai, Voterai mkomana, Abinde, Abinde mkomana. Harawanze kambo zama kukia kia, asikutonga nyika kudikia, mukomana ntia dekia, yellow yashika banya ya taji. Yeah, Citizen Coalition for Change, New Great Zimbabwe, one people, one nation, one vision. Simuka Zimbabwe,